Poor people who dated rich people, what did you learn? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. I grew up in what I can only describe as the identical median income household and had a decent job. So not poor, but I dated a woman who I met while she was in law school whose family was very rich. The subconscious expectations were overwhelming. I would plan a little surprise and she would expect something like a trip to Europe. She wasn't trying to make me feel bad. Her expectations were just so high from the world she grew up in. Answer, not me, but my cousin. Back in the 90s when we were teenagers, she briefly dated a rich boy whose school was near the shopping center where she and her friends would hang out after school. For her 16th birthday, her parents bought her a really nice watch. And when she was showing him, he was all, I can't believe they didn't get you a car. Spent the day going on about the car he got for his 16th birthday and how a watch was nothing. She was devastated and they broke up a couple of weeks later. Story 2. That they are often insulated from the experience of peasant life. I was working 12-hour shifts in an industrial kitchen trying to save up enough for my next semester of college. Her friend, whose house had a fully stocked kitchen that only the staff ever used, heard that I was working to pay for school and therefore could not take time off to go on a vacation. She took a moment to think about my situation, looked concerned with her furrowed brow, and then finally asked, why don't you just tell your parents? School is a good thing. Of course they'll want to pay for that. Answer, this reminds me of a friend my girlfriend at the time had. Perfectly nice woman, but wholly out of touch. Similar situation. Bunch of poor college kids talking about their financial issues. This woman sympathetically suggests that everyone just ask their family to sell part of their mountain. Yes, fudge LOL. How could we ever forget the family mountain? Edit. Also just realized that this has nothing to do with dating someone rich. Story 3. A lot of people want to pretend to be their friend and take advantage of them. Like a lot. They assumed I was doing the same and would talk openly about it to me. It was honestly disgusting. Story 4. I learned how to play golf. Her dad always wanted to chat with me about my future, plans, business opportunities, college choices, etc. And he always wanted to discuss these over a round of golf at the country club. I really dislike golf. Also, apparently 100K means nothing. Dude literally offered to buy me a new Mercedes and have my old beater truck disposed of. Answer, my experience sans the Benz offer. GF's dad was a founder of a massive engineering firm. I was a teenage dirtbag from social housing with no direction in life. Met her at a friend's party and immediately hit it off. He took me to his golf games, client meetings, and social events and had some of the most meaningful conversations I've ever had with a human. Told me what books to read and what things to focus on, what to say around people and how to build relationships. Honestly, I think he was tired of being a dad to 3 pretty spoiled girls and just wanted a son to impart knowledge on. The GF and I broke up about a year later, but he was the first and best mentor I've ever had. All I've achieved is thanks to that guy. Edit. Lots of interest, so easier just to answer it all at once. The biggest message from him has always been, you are not your circumstance. The biggest learning for me was he telling me that becoming successful is a long game. It's not something that everyone gets in their 20s or even 30s, but slow and steady wins the race, so be patient. Taught me the value of paying yourself first and compound interest. Because of him, I started putting away $20 every week in buying tech companies in 2002. He was super bullish on e-commerce becoming a massive thing and got me into buying Amazon early on after the dot-com bubble dust settled. The second biggest learning was the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people and showing gratitude to these people as they help you along the way. He was huge on gratitude and said that your social capital is more important than your financial capital. Took that with me through life, and it hasn't failed me yet. The first book he gave me was How to Make Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Banal, I know, but I was an 18-year-old pothead with like zero knowledge, and it taught me the basics of being a good conversationalist and building lasting relationships. Some of the other major ones was 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, What They Teach You at HBS, and The Richest Man in Babylon. He would gift me books when I would come over and then ask me what I took away from them after I read them. Helped me articulate and internalize the messages way better. Kept in touch with him for almost 2 decades after, until he passed away in 2019. Story 5. No matter how humble and rational one is, dating someone several tax brackets higher will test one's ego and self-worth. Answer. One of my childhood friends dated a girl from a quite wealthy family. He's not exactly from Struggle Street, But he wasn't put through an elite private school like his girlfriend at the time was. They were in love and wanted to get married for some time. They had the means to fund it themselves, could have even eloped, but there was absolutely no approval whatsoever from the girl's father. They both knew that it was because he wasn't a private schoolboy with a degree that lands you an elite company. Her previous couple of boyfriends never got this treatment because they were exactly that type, despite being pretty immature and sheltered. But they were from wealthy families, from day one until 4 years later when they broke up. A decent guy with a decent job, owning his own home, difficult to do in my country, relying on no one for anything, just could not do anything to get past the class barrier in this man's head. That fudge with your self-worth, a lot. Story 6. That being rich makes some people not really learn to have to take responsibility for their actions. Girl I used to date lost like 5 out of 1,000 phones in a couple years, but her parents would always just immediately buy her a new one. So I kind of felt like she never learned from it. Answer: I had the same realization. XGF's sister would lose her iPhone multiple times per year, and each time Daddy would buy her a brand new one, always the top model. She left her phone in Ubers multiple times on a span of a few months, and her family acted like, "Oh, that's so Jennifer." She'd lose her head if it weren't attached to her. One of their friends lost his phone, and we found it the next day and returned it to him. He looked almost annoyed that we were returning it to him. I asked him, "Do you not want it back or something? You seem sorry to see it again." To which he replied, "Well, I'm not sure what to do with two now," as he pulled out a brand new one that he had gotten earlier that day. There was also a family friend of theirs who totaled multiple Teslas as a teen, and her dad's reaction was to just buy another new one, because how else is she going to get to school? My ex-GF's father suggested that they should start buying her SUVs instead, because if she's going to crash that often, it's safer in a bigger vehicle. If one of my kids crash, I want them to be the survivor. I'm pretty sure my jaw dropped. Story 7. You can have all the money in the world and still have bad taste. He would offer me his card to go get stuff to make his 4,800 SQ house feel like someone actually lived there. Otherwise, it just had sparse, ugly furniture and posters scattered around. Answer: oh man, was this shocking when I saw it the first time. Been wanting a gigantic gas-powered RC truck for years. Finally found one, agreed on a price with the seller. He asked me to meet at his house. Pull up, giant house, 3 Lamborghinis out front. He invites me in to check out the truck. Almost every wall has posters of Shoot AI Joker, guns or money art. All the furniture is hideous bright red, and there's just clutter strewn everywhere. Story 8. My story is a little obscure, so I'm going to try and not be shoot about it. I'm a male, and at the time I was around 19-20. I was convinced I didn't want to work and wanted to become a sugar baby. I'd done some commercial modeling and was pretty confident with what I thought was a sharp tongue. I started going to country clubs, fancy restaurants, bars in the hopes I could hit on a super successful woman. I was probably viewed and did get propositioned as the adult worker more than a dozen times. One day, and I preface day because I think it helped, I snuck into a charity event at one of the best golf courses in my city. I met a woman there in her late 60s, and we hit it off. She was a widow of a pretty prestigious local university's president. I managed to get back to her house, and it's massive. A literal mansion. I grew up in a trailer, so I'd never seen something like hers before. I turned it on after that. I'm set kind of attitude. We have intimacy and spend the next week together. I don't leave the house the entire time. She had a chef, a shower the size of a small bedroom, a pool, just so much I wasn't used to. I even quit my job because I thought I shouldn't leave, even though they were asking where I was. This all continued for about 3 months. Turns out she was so darn cool. I legitimately loved hanging out with her. Watched movies, talked for hours, walked around the neighborhood, going out to dinner. She paid for everything. The age difference didn't matter at all eventually. I got to the point where I liked her so much I bowed out. Even some shitheads have a conscience, and this wasn't something I wanted. I realized I had no intention of this progressing. I was honest with her, and we parted ways. I called her maybe 3 times a year after that, just to check in for a little while. But at 37 now, I'm sure she's gone. God bless you, Anne. You were awesome in more ways than you know. Answer: I think Anne played you, mate. Throwing it out there, a lady in her 60s whose ex-husband was the president of a prestigious university sound like she is as clever and cunning as a fox. You mentioned that you got propositioned as a male adult worker a fair bit. Well, Anne just got a live and Gigolo BF experience for a fraction of the price by letting you play in that playground. That was her mansion. I mean, tip my hat to Anne. She got companionship, intimacy, and it was all literally free for her. And she had bragging rights of having a toy boy that wasn't an intimacy worker. Gals got class. Story 9. My college girlfriend of 5 years dropped me like a hot potato when her IBM vice president father passed away and left her a huge amount of company stock and, in addition, valuable real estate. My girlfriend found out that she was an heiress when somebody in the middle of the night dropped off the will of her late mother that left most of the family assets to her. My girlfriend had nothing to do with her family because her father was an absolute bully, but the minute she got her hands on significant dough, suddenly I was not good enough for her. The class separation, in particular, when the woman is from a well-off family, is an absolute brutal fact. 40 years later, this experience still hurts. Story 10. Irony and karma. Her mother disliked me because I was a bum. Technically, I was. Her daughter said that I was going to do great. I did great later. Story 11. Not dated, but was best friends with. They will never truly be able to even begin to comprehend your struggles, and therefore they will constantly dismiss and minimize your problems, which will lead you to be extremely frustrated. Trying to explain to someone that you can't afford takeout and need them to do their dishes right now so you can cook, while they are telling you to just order out and put it on a credit card, most of the time it's not worth the friendship. Story 12. Equestrianism is a thing. Also, pretty much any labor you can imagine, there is a service pool you can hire for it. Story 13. Money insulates the family from accountability. The behavior I'd see out of them sometimes over the smallest things was shocking. Story 14. They will initially enjoy being themselves with you, as in themselves before they were rich. They will dote on you and buy you stuff for whatever you are bringing to the relationship, be it companionship or whatever. And then, if it's still going good, they will subtly try to change you as they try to integrate you into their crowd, your clothing, your view on things if they differ widely, and it will be up to you whether or not to do so. Story 15. I wouldn't consider myself poor, but I did date a woman who was technically a 1%er for a couple of years. She was an amazing person, extremely grounded and real, excellent parents and upbringing, and while she did shop high-end, was still frugal and low-key about it. The only way someone would have known she had money was the fact that she had a Mercedes G-Wagon, and only because it was her dream car. Story 16. I learned that for some, money above a certain amount directly facilitates the development of paranoid, hoarding, and antisocial type behaviors, overly self-protective, etc. And I think this does come from the fact that it's weird to have a lot of money in a world where so many people need that money to be shared, where it may actually be unethical for you to not share. I'm sure there is a lot of weird interpersonal stuff that happens within that dynamic. I actually think I developed some more compassion for people who are extremely wealthy from dating my ex. I also think the money itself, it's like the more you have, the more you're afraid of losing it. She was really frantic about only making $12K in a day instead of 18. And I told her that I only had 200 to my name total and that I felt fine. And she was genuinely astounded. So interesting. Answer, I don't think the fear is losing it. It's more like your baseline for what's normal increases because your goalposts just move further as you earn more unless you intentionally do the work to try to understand how much is enough. Like after earning 400K a year for multiple years, your identity becomes, I am someone who earns 400K a year. To go back to 100K, which is actually good, feels like something is wrong. Or she might have an ADHD type of mindset where if she doesn't get her numbers, she gets a sense of impending doom. My 1M year friend is like this and is working with a therapist on this. Story 17. I wouldn't say I was poor by the time. Did, but I grew up very poor. They were rich enough that they just didn't even really think about paying student loans. Two key things I learned were, 1, they thought simply having money meant you were good with it. 2, they had no concept of risk, sunk costs, or whether something was sensible as a stance on anything really. It was very clear it was all just about what they would like to do, have happen believe is right in a perfect world. Not what is the better option in our circumstances, how real-world restraints actually impacted it. And to be clear, I don't just mean financially. Story 18. Rich people have no idea how much anything costs, and they have no idea how much money anyone who isn't wealthy makes. Answer. I was at my brother's in-laws' place, this was before the wedding couple years ago, and I talked about bartending work and how it was generally my goal. A decent shift of work meant taking home 100 in tips. The look of shock and confusion was pretty hilarious. I don't think they have much respect for me since sharing that information, and since then, I have become an attorney. Story 19. That even when they struggled in the early days, most have them forgotten what it's like to not have money. They lose touch with reality real quick. A couple of thousand here and there is nothing. Meanwhile, we live paycheck to paycheck-ish, and they can't understand why. Story 20. My ex-girlfriend's family was a stratosphere higher than my upbringing financially. 1. Constantly compared to members of their family and never can match up to their expectations. 2. Huge difference in norms and what is acceptable or how things are handled. X. A summer BBQ is a polo and slacks fancy dress shorts event, not t-shirt and shorts. 3. They keep personal events within the house to a creepy extent. We don't talk about the family outside the house, I was specifically told. Whereas growing up poor, everyone knows your business. Story 21. That most are actually way more humble than your LARPing rich person. There's a huge difference in how the woman with the Gucci belt, LV bag, and a negative balance will treat you versus the man in head-to-toe TJ Maxx but has $2 million in his account. Answer. I live near a very affluent area. Lots of old money and billionaires. The new rich show it off, move there, and basically live paycheck to paycheck. The wealthy people eat at diners and you would never know they had enough money to buy your house 10 times without a bother. They are mostly extremely kind and friendly. The new rich are not. They use it as a means to look down on people. Story 22. I dated an Austrian baroness for a while. She and her family were absolute psychos, narcissists, sadists, and so elitist. I reckon there's some inbreeding in the Eichbichler family. Story 23. I find wealthy men make the best lovers. Is that true? No, but if you tell them that sometimes they give you their credit card and let you loose in the mall for an hour. Story 24. Rich people's lives are so much more fun, luxurious, that if everyone saw it, there would be a revolution tomorrow. It's absurd how much better it is to be rich, at least in America. Their healthcare, nutrition, hired help, homes, entertainment, travel, networks, clothes, product services, they can afford all of it is unbelievably nicer. It's unreal to witness. Story 25. Married a rich person. Regular problems arise, but also unbelievably silly problems that only happen when you have too much money and no real problems. So you gotta make some up. Extended family is building a $2 million custom home in a rural area and are deeply distraught that the specialty plumbing expert they need to fly in from Norway will cost to get a consult, which does not include install nor the inevitable future maintenance. Dog, you do not need fancy European plumbing in rural Idaho, trust me. Story 26. My brother dated a rich girl. They dated for about a year. They broke up because he never wanted to do anything. He was putting himself through university. She had no concept of money. She would ask him to come with her to Europe for the weekend and stuff like that. She once got a new car because she saw it in a nicer color. When they broke up, he had about $10K worth of jewelry she has bought him. He never wore jewelry unless she asked him to. Story 27. I thought rich people would be the caricatures I saw on TV. The ones I met put a lot of energy into pretending they were just normal people. Story 28. They can be petty, very petty, more so than any poor person I've ever met. My ex-wife's family was ridiculously rich, but they were cheap and fake as hell. Story 29. I come from like abject poverty, and my ex comes from like the kind of family that can see the Kennedy compound from across the bay. By the time we met, his family was more like upper middle class, and mine was like, well, still very poor actually, but that divide is still smaller than it was in the past. And at this point, his family isn't doing super great and him living a little better than he is, but we are both solidly middle class. I couldn't believe the way the threats would come out when he was angry. Everything could be normal, and then suddenly a custody dispute would come up, and he would flip right to my family will destroy you. He really believed it too, and in hindsight, I know that they wouldn't have and really couldn't have. But it's like he really believed that he still had that power, and when everything else went to shoot, he loved it and needed to feel that way. Story 30. The ones born into wealth, as opposed to working their way up and earning it, are shockingly naive, sheltered, and clueless about how the real world works. They literally don't get it. They might as well live on a different planet. They truly don't live in the same world you and I do. They also tend to be very emotional, catty, and dramatic, men and women, because they haven't had any genuine struggles or problems in life, so they are exceedingly bored. So they'll stir, shoot, and invent problems and drama, so they have something to do, some kind of conflict to overcome and occupy their time. Story 31. My insights are based on a combination of 1, falling for someone from a rich background, or even just dating upper middle class men who knew they'd inherit the family wealth eventually, and 2, dating folks who grew up in developed countries. While I was from a poorer country, I realized a lot of their time and energy didn't go into figuring out survival, career, and money like mine did. They had choices and a relaxed attitude. Just the way they tackled education, interviews, or opportunities was different. Like, they knew they wouldn't necessarily lose much if they didn't get that. Whereas for me, every conversation, every application, every interview felt very life in passing. Also, they could just plan for a longer runway. For me, it was hard to see beyond a couple of weeks or months because I didn't know if I'd have enough money to get by. They could be in a similarly stressful situation, but also be planning a vacation midway because they knew they'd be fine in the long term. Story 32. They were really entitled and unaware of poverty. They viewed themselves as poor just because they were poorer than the rest of their friends. They had a very typical family structure, with a love of the nuclear family. They upheld very conservative or traditional beliefs and had a love of the monarchy. I remember one of the cousins, even richer, was experimenting being gay and everybody knew about it, but in a very hush gossip kind of way. Feel bad for the guy, it was like the family's dirty secret. Lots of gossip and manipulation. They tend to favor subtlety over directness. I think it comes with the territory of trying to maintain position or climb in social status. Story 33. They just could not understand. When I needed to say no to an expense, concerts that required plane tickets to attend. Oh, he'll pick a cheap dinner place. Mom, I have $200 in my bank account. It's not personal, I just can't. Story 34. My last girlfriend's family was really well off. Parents had multiple houses, a company, and a yearly income, around $500K in Germany. They were always nice to me, but I could constantly feel I didn't belong there. Lots of doctor and other high-class jobs in the family kids, going to elite universities that cost half my yearly salary as tuition, triggered a lot of insecurities in me that I'm not good enough. I knew if we stayed together I would be very well off, but it always had this bad aftertaste that they have some form of control. They told me if I ever want to buy a house, we will get the money from them, but I'm 100% sure this would have the side effect of them being able to say, we gave you money, so we want you to do what we say. Story 35. I am still dating my boyfriend, but he is the richer person. However, my parents are pretty well off as well, doctor and engineer, so the differences I notice are in the details. Background. Boyfriend's dad is in finance and has a portfolio of $1 billion. He manages one. His mom will throw anything out if she doesn't like it anymore or just doesn't want it. This could even be something she bought a week prior, or even food she bought that day that she tasted and didn't like. 2. My boyfriend, 23, and his sister, 28, both have credit cards attached to their parents' bank accounts that they can basically spend anything on. I am now also allowed to use my boyfriend's credit card. 3. Bills in general are rarely thought about. Doesn't matter how much it takes to heat the pool, run the sauna, have all the lights on in the house. Maybe my parents are just frugal, but things always have to be turned off in my household. 4. A purchase is rarely contemplated. I feel like I go over each week and they've bought something new. Example, my boyfriend's dad got another jet ski for this summer, so me and my boyfriend could each have our own while on the lake. 5, as a rich person, you must have multiple cars, I feel like. I personally don't have my own car because I'm unwillingly to spend my own money, but whenever I need one, I ask my boyfriend, and he lets me borrow his while he takes another they have in their driveway. They are also very casual about cars, even though to me they're expensive, $100K cars. I was so surprised when they just let me drive any car of theirs. 6, a passion is a passion, and you can lose money on it if you have a lot of money in general. My BFS dad bought a sports team because he really enjoyed the sport. He's probably losing about $250K a year running the team. But because he loves the sport and sees some future in it after he retires, he's okay with it. 7, this is the most important to me, being set up for life. No matter what my boyfriend and his siblings do, they will always either have their parents or have their inheritance, especially my boyfriend, as he is the only biological kid of the dad. I try not to think about it too much, but my boyfriend will inherit his dad's portfolio business, each piece of property, trust fund, etc. In reality, he is set for life, but thankfully he does not rely on it and works really hard in school. Small things. My BF went to a party and had friends in his car when one person threw up in it. His parents just bought him a new car, $95K, as a solution. Rich parents will do anything to make their kids happy. My boyfriend had to spend one night in a hotel with a friend, and the room his mom booked him was a city view. She asked if it was okay, and my boyfriend didn't give a happy yes, so she immediately paid the extra money for an ocean view, even though they'd only spend 10 of their time in the actual hotel room. The room was $1,300 a night too. If you are rich, you must have your own jeweler that custom makes your jewelry. Sadly, money doesn't always mean you have good taste, and a $70K ring can look ugly, in my opinion. My BF's sister has a massive shopping addiction and probably spends $20,000–$30,000 a year on clothes. She has no strong job other than running the sports team. Most of her clothes still have the tags on, and she buys multiples of things, the same 100 shirt 5 times at the store, just because she can. Luck for me, she gives me some clothes. At the end of the days, these are just minuscule things that I notice. And my BFS family is very sweet and genuine, and I've always been made to feel like another daughter in their home. Story 36, that they're completely disconnected from reality, and that making their own way means taking their trust fund and doing what they want with it instead of following daddy's footsteps exactly. No concept of how they're at an advantage to other people. Story 37, I learned her parents paid for everything. Her super nice apartment, car, all utilities, and school paid for by her parents. They once told me they were investing in their future by doing it. They pushed her to be a nurse so she could take care of them when they were older. Yeah, poor lady never had a chance. Story 38. Most of my wealthy friends live somewhat restrictive lives. Their family really held the wealth over their head as a way to control them. You have to get XYZ's degree, or go to XYZ's school, or act this way or that way, dress this way or that way. These types of things. Most of my wealthy friends were horribly starved for attention. My boyfriend was shunted off to school in Minnesota from Seoul. He was lonely and ended up being super needy once he latched on to me. He told me he rarely had contact with his parents even when at home in Seoul. It was all nannies and house staff when he was growing up. Story 39. That I should have taken the car she offered to buy me. We didn't see eye to eye politically, and I broke up with her. I had many friends and family members tell me I was ignorant for not taking the free vehicle. Story 40. It became evident that he was raised on nothing but money. He had no life skills, no emotional intelligence, no hobbies or opinions of his own. It was near impossible to have a constructive conversation with him because he just went along with everything I said and did without question. It felt like I was dating a lapdog. He failed his first year of college twice and had no drive to improve academically or even consider alternative paths. All he did was eat and play mobile games all day, including when we were out on dates or with friends. He was a sweet guy with good intentions, and he obviously didn't choose the family he was born into. But none of the expensive gifts, fancy dinners, or boat rides could stop it from being the dullest relationship I've ever been in. Story 41. The difference between kinda poor, me, and comfortably middle class, her, is staggering. Edit, sailing is fudge awesome and stupidly expensive. Story 42. It was a great experience for me. I learned about various different types of cuisines and food I didn't know even existed. She loved to travel, so she told me about the places she went to, and I loved her stories. I later traveled to some of those countries myself and was well prepared for it. Her father got her a piano and a private piano tutor when we lived together, so I got some free lessons and now can play some piano. Her mother did a lot of charity work, so I got to volunteer in a few in Casablanca and Dakar. I learned not all rich people stupidly spend money. Her family came from old money, so didn't spend too much on cars and clothes. I didn't even realize how rich she was until we went to Paris and found out that her family owned multiple properties in 8th and 16th arrondissement, and they were an old aristocratic family. Story 43. That they were a nice, normal, loving family, and they just happened to be financially secure. I thought they might be weird about me coming from zero money. They raised their son in an amazing way, and the family was close and incredibly open to me. I was super lucky I got to spend time with them in that way and take part in some stuff I wouldn't have been able to had I not been with their son. I also found out that they all do all the rich people's sports like skiing, which is hilarious, and I thought was only on TV. Everyone also had hobbies and life goals and were expected to be responsible financially. Now I am doing well for myself financially, and I am grateful they treated me like another family member during that time. It was fun, really opened my eyes to a different type of family. Story 44. It started and was already over in one weekend. We went to some posh nightclub where she and a few of her friends had bought out the entire second floor. They even posted gorillas with earpieces and suits by the stairs to keep all the poors away. You could just walk up and get any drink you wanted from their private bartender. It was boring as fudge. Meanwhile, all the poor people were having the time of their lives on the first floor. She grabbed me and pulled me over to the railing, looking down at the crowd below. Middle class and working class folks dancing and laughing. Then she said, "Look at them. They all look up at us, wishing they were us." I puked a little in my mouth and made my way outside. Unfortunately, I got tipsy a bit later. One phone call, one taxi ride, and I was in her bed. We never spoke again after that. Story 45. If you can't pay, you can't play. I'll give you the example. Rich girlfriend wanted to go on a ski holiday. I, the wage slave, couldn't afford it. She went without me. One time she wanted to take a 2-week vacation in Australia. I couldn't get the time off work, and I didn't have the money saved, so she went without me. She liked expensive cocktails and prime cuts of meat at Michelin star restaurants that I couldn't afford, so she went without me. Eventually, seeing a pattern, I found that she went without me a lot and we ended up going our own ways without each other. She eventually married a rich guy, surprise, surprise, a trust fund prick who kept on making her pay for her own stuff, even after they were married. Story 46. My ex wasn't rich, but his family was. He couldn't understand poor people ethics. His family had no work ethic, no loyalty, no genuine faces. Everyone feels entitled to and taken care of by the one rich guy that supports everyone. Nobody felt like they had to secure themselves without his money in case it wasn't there one day. Coming from a poor background, I know you can't trust anyone to take care of you like that. You need to be there for yourself. Everything can be taken away in just a moment. Instead of working, building skill sets, or establishing themselves, everyone's only job was to kiss the jerk of that one rich guy, 247. They were willing to like, cheat, steal, and worse, to get on his good side. They mostly lived on islands isolated from normal folk, and they have secrets that can ruin shittens of lives across the country. These people are worse than crack addicts. They have the money already and will do anything as cruel as they can think of to get more. And none of his family understood the importance of community. I dislike that the most. Basically, I learned they're shoot people, but with power and status, and I'll never be involved with anyone like that again. Story 47. He chooses meals according to what he wants to eat. I choose meals based on the oldest thing in the fridge. Story 48. Be careful not to become their slave, or to be pacified by large purchases, or let someone think they own you just because they can pay for stuff. Also, don't go into debt trying to match their lifestyle, even though you want equality. Story 49. Money is a magnifier. Whatever good or bad traits you have become magnified by it. The nice people become the nicest. The not nice people become the most not nice. The generous become even more generous, and the miserly become even more miserly, and on and on. Money just empowers you to become more of the person you really are. Story 50. They really just don't get it. I can afford that when it's like the luxury cheese instead of the no-name cheddar. It does not compute. It's all you can afford cheese instead of yes, let's get the cheaper option, and it's exhausting. Also, they never offered to pay. IDK, man. It was very strange. A lot of the stresses in my life were not in theirs because they always had a financial cushion. It felt skewed in a way I've never had a relationship feel. Story 51. I have generally found that when dating rich guys, they would treat me like a supporting character in their story, as opposed to a partner of equivalent standing and value. A fellow human in my own right. Also, they were often miserable. I am sure exceptions exist, but I haven't found them yet. Story 52. It can be a very disgustingly lazy, loveless life that revolves around physical things. That being said, I've also met rich people who had loving families and healthy relationships. They're just like everyone else, really. Story 53. I picked up an unfortunate taste for rich people's cheese, wine, and whiskey. I can only occasionally afford to indulge in the cheese one, and I've basically stopped ever drinking wine and whiskey. That was 25 years ago, and I still remember what they were like and how garbage everything subpar is. Story 54. I dated a trust fund baby for many years in my 20s. I always said when we were together, the greatest thrill was filling up my gas tank and grocery shopping without having to check my bank account. But to be honest, the biggest lesson I learned was money really does not make you happy. I am grateful for our relationship just for the lesson that might have taken me decades to learn. Also, it's been said on here before, but good family is better than rich family. These people were miserable with each other, and the money only made it worse. Everyone in the family was so isolated because of feuds that stemmed back generations. Now for practical lessons. If you are able to and have the self-control, put everything on a credit card, then pay it off immediately. Watch those credit card points rack up by the end of the year. Invest everything that you can early on. That compounding interest could be your make or break in retirement. Hire a competent financial advisor as soon as you reach that point. They can help you move money around and/or invest to help lessen the tax blow every year. Story 55. I learned that many of our problems could and are 100 solved by money. Those who say otherwise are either lying, ignorant, or coping with the absence of it. Don't get me wrong, money doesn't solve everything, but it can buy you freedom from shoot work, healthcare, both physical and mental, food and safety. So politely eat my jerk if you disagree. Story 56. Her parents were horrified and said, Oh no, throw those away. When I reached for the bread ends when they walked in on us making sandwiches. Obviously not hyper rich, but still a big class shock. Answer. My family wasn't extremely wealthy, but wealthy enough to waste food. Then I moved out and was poor for about a year. And even now I'll still freeze scraps of stale bread and other things that can be used later on. I travel for work now, so it does actually come in handy when I get home at 10 p.m. and all the shops are closed and need something quick and easy. Can usually find something in the freezer. Story 57. Married rich and have a lot to say here. 1. The stereotype that all people from wealthy families are lazy and entitled is far from true. If you grow up seeing your parents value education and work hard, you likely will too. My husband has some of the strongest work ethic I've ever seen. 2. The very wealthy are smart about their money and protect it well. They diversify income sources strategically. They also set up trusts and foundations and all other sorts of protections for future generations, e.g. Q-tip trust, and only allowing members of the bloodline access to trusts excludes stepkids. 3. Money does not fix everything. It can make some problems, i.e. addition, worse. But it sure is nice knowing that most of life's inconveniences can be solved by writing a check. 4. It's weird how people can treat you differently. My friends and family are all same, but I've noticed jealousy from new people a couple of times. People sort of oddly bragging or putting down something like the car you just got or trying to compete with you. My husband has dealt with it his whole life and says to just ignore it, but I'm still learning to navigate it. 5. Lastly, while money can't buy you happiness, the feeling of peace being able to provide for your kids and take care of your aging parents comes pretty close. Answer. I was related to someone rich and we had the same last name and we lived in the same state. The way people would change when they would hear my last name was disheartening. The way some people immediately act nice and try to use you and other people immediately dislike you. It was a relief to move somewhere far away and no one reacted to my name at all. Story 58. It can all go away in an instant when the breadwinner is a narcissistic, pathological liar, and when it does, the person who grew up in comfort is not prepared for real-life struggles. They will struggle in ways someone who grew up poor simply cannot understand, and if you decide to keep them in your life, it'll take some serious empathy and learning to guide them through it. Story 59. I couldn't buy the little things I wanted to buy for her at that time. It really breaks my heart till today. Story 60. That I am attracted to effort and not fancy things. The gifts in first class, flight tickets and luxury hotels doesn't hit the same when it's planned and booked by an assistant. I would rather go camping backpacking with a guy who plans it for us and is equally excited about it as I am. Story 61. I actually like the outcome of this one. I learned to appreciate higher quality clothing, not necessarily crazy expensive, but not fast fashion, the value of investment pieces. I feel like $1 million no matter what I wear, where I go, or who I meet, and it's more sustainable for the environment to invest in staples that will last years. That insight really did make a positive difference in my life. Story 62. I learned the little ways. They'll always think they're better than you. They have something they need to prove to a parent. There's a deep feeling of them not being good enough. They absolutely know you're replaceable. They can genuinely like you, but if they get an idea of who they want to impress and the best way to do it through a partner, they'll discard you. Again, it's a deeper wound and they're constantly trying to impress someone. They'll usually be in relationships where there's a lot of power struggle on both ends. There are subconscious feelings of superiority and feelings of resentment from each side. Power struggle won't always be obvious, but it's there. Money doesn't buy class. They eat food off the floor like dogs. Story 63. He was used to a type of luxury that was baffling to me in more ways than one. I had no idea he came from money until he invited me over to his place, and I realized it was posh, huge, and exclusive. When we met and as we were dating, he worked a waiter kitchen job, doing crazy long and late hours. He did dress well and took care of himself, wore nice watches, and was particular about his whiskey. But apart from that, him and his family were super grounded, despite the houses abroad with multiple cars and live-in staff. Except for the postcode and the birthday presents, which were wild. I would never have imagined he came from money. Story 64. She could be the best or the most innocent rich person, but she still is a rich person. There are things about us poor peasants that she will never understand, and those will challenge the relationship over and over again. Story 65. Work for a rich family in my teens as a gardener. The daughter was just using me for intimacy. I learned that moral don't exist with them. Story 66. That rich people are not evil. So many wealthy folks are incredibly giving, considerate, and kind. I was raised in a household that preached those with money are selfish, self-centered, and evil. Story 67. College should be paid for by parents, no student loans. Students should have a family credit card for living expenses. Budget $3K a month. Keep in mind tuition, room, and board are covered by the parents. So that's just spending money. Car problems are inconveniences. Just get a loaner or a rental while yours is in the shop. No big deal. Same with car accidents. Oh, and get rid of the car after the accident, trade it in and dip into savings to buy the new one. No big deal. The account will bounce back in a couple months at most, right? You shouldn't work while going to school. It's stressful and distracting. When parents threaten to pull this financial support as a means of controlling behavior, shoot spirals fast. Same problems, different mechanisms. Always be investing. Always be planning 10 years ahead. Never tie yourself to a job unless they pay you an absurd amount of money. Always advocate for yourself at work. Nobody cares about you more than yourself. Get into a position where people see you as the talent and you will have all the freedom you want. Basically, be an individual contributor. If you want true wealth, start your own business and stay the course. This is advice I personally am not going to follow. Too much work. Once you hit a certain level, budgets don't matter. How much money you have doesn't really matter. It comes in, it comes out. It all kind of manages itself once there's enough of it. Move to the West Coast from the Northeast? Sure. New house in Tahoe? Sure. Trip to Germany? Sure. Spur of the moment golf trip to St. Andrews? YOLO. The money always comes in. Some always goes aside for investment. The rest, well, everything is paid for, so it's just free cash flow. I ended up marrying this girl, and I think her parents sometimes forget how not rich we are, that a 1K expense is kind of a big deal. They just live in a different world. Story 68. I grew up very, and I mean very poor. We never missed a meal, but dinner was frequently instant mashed potatoes and canned corned beef. My partner isn't rich, but definitely upper middle class. Her parents took her and a friend to a resort each summer. She never had to go without. I broke the family mold by getting good jobs and making something of myself. Or as my mother was fond of reminding me, I was acting above my station. When it comes to money, my partner is very frugal, whereas I am happy to spend money on things that we want. We are lucky enough to have a good whack of savings and no debt. So if we need a new couch, I'm like, cool, let's go buy the couch. My partner will agonize for weeks, sometimes months over what to buy. And then once we eventually do buy on, she will second guess the purchase. I have no idea what her issue is. I find it baffling. Story 69. Mine found a way to work it into way too many conversations. She would pretend to be embarrassed by it, but it was clear that was just a vehicle to bring it up while trying to relate to people. Story 70. He was quite a lazy person in everything. Never pushed himself to achieve more. Although he moved out, there was a failure to launch. Story 71. I'm very middle class, but when I was younger, I dated a very wealthy girl, like boarding school rich. They have absolutely zero clue what it's like to go without. Like 4th of July, she had a hard time deciding whether to spend it on her father's yacht or her stepdad's. She was fudging the head and also had a substances problem. Story 72. I didn't date someone but nannied for a millionaire family. She divorced him and married a billionaire. So, I saw behind both curtains. What I saw was sadly they were deeply unhappy. All her expectations were on her looks, and she still got cheated on. She would drink to cope, and it'd have to get her face down off the toilet before her kids saw. The children had emotional issues. The boy definitely already had daddy issues and would act out for attention. It was sad to see. I love that kid. They were also very entitled in the sense that they were used to people jumping when they threw money at them. The did couldn't understand one night I had other plans. He kept increasing the payment and it got stupid high and I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not available. He didn't understand. I could tell they weren't used to hearing no. Story 73. A budget should cover everything you need, not be limited by how much money you have. This is absurd to hear as someone who has been living paycheck to paycheck my entire 30-year life. I didn't even think of another perspective on what a budget means. They just buy everything they need and adjust if they need to accordingly. Checking prices on things every time before buying wasn't a habit. You want to go get coffee? Go to the coffee shop you want to go to, not the one that fits within your budget. Buying groceries? Whole Foods is 5 men closer than TJ's, so let's just go there. Literally would walk into any restaurant anywhere and get whatever you want, not worrying about the price. $2,500 night for drinks with friends? It's a drop in the bucket. No one expects anyone to pay their part. They just take turns on who pays the next weekend. Nothing formal, just, I got you guys tonight, parties for the sake of it. Themes, decor, catering, for any reason. Just wanted a little get-together. We'll have a $5K budget of catering, adult beverage, and decor. Making a dress code for personal parties, not going anywhere private event space, just so we have a reason to go out shopping. And moving. Let's just go live in NYC for a year, just to experience it more than just a vacation. Just practically doing anything you want. I have amazing friends that are elevating me to get up there with them. They paid my full ride to go to EDC with them, just because they wanted me to go with them. Never in my life did I think I would be able to afford it. It's just wild. Story 74. That person's parents manipulated their children's reality with money on strings. They tried turning their adult child on me in myriad ways, hurting their child just to spite me. I finally found my way out of that dysfunctional group, but emotional scars remain. What did I learn? I learned to stay away from codependent potential estate benefactors. Story 75. Not all rich people splash their wealth. A lot of old money families dress and live like upper middle class, but have way more zeros in the bank and properties all over the world. His mom and her siblings brag to each other about how cheap they get things. Proper cheap, like, I got this bag for $8. And one aunt, who married a heart surgeon from an even richer family, scavenges landscaping materials off the side of the road for the garden of her multi-million home. Also, birds of a feather really do flock together. Almost every in-law of his mom's generation are also from wealthy families, and they're friends with other wealthy families. This also applies to values. All the family friends I've met, who are usually friends of 30, 50 years at this point, are similarly stupidly rich, but also friendly, down-to-earth, and generous people. Also, on a more similar vein to other comments here, they really love golf, ha ha ha. Some things are universal, I guess. Answer. My parents are not rich, but worth a few million, and my mom washes Ziploc bags. My wife and I are not rich, but well off, barely worth 7 figures. And my wife yelled at me a couple years ago for buying Smuckers because we don't have Smuckers money. In my experience, frivolous spending is a bell curve. Poor people save every penny. Upper middle class people flaunt it. And as you go higher in income, people get more modest and frugal. Story 76. I once overheard a girl I was dating speaking to her mother at her mother's huge house, talking about she should only accept me proposing if I had X amount in the bank to support a baby, if it happens, and if I got a mortgage on a property in the next year to future-proof himself, etc. I never told her I heard any of this, on hoping she would mention it first, but she never did. We drifted apart a few months after. Probably from the unspoken tension. Father-in-law was an absolute dude, though. Very wealthy guy in publishing, and we just spoke about jazz and real ale. And to her credit, mother-in-law was a cool lady, too. It's just the checklist of requirements that was a bit shocking. Story 77. Their richness was in the 1 to 5 million range. So rich, but not screw everything, I could do what I want rich. I found most of them had really awesome families with very little problems. Or at least very little problems that presented on the surface. Children were generally well behaved, and most of the kids had expectations on doing affluent jobs, going to school to be a doctor, lawyer, etc. They also prized marriage more highly and were religious. My family was broken and had problems. Substances use was a norm. Parent didn't know how to parent, and we didn't have the resources to make any corrections. The people around me didn't see value in marriage. And I remember myself and the kids around me mostly strives to work in the trades or do anything else that seemed like high income, but was really low income. Poor families around me also seemed to fall victim to scammers and MLM, really anything that promised dreams. Story 78. Definitely street stupid. I dated a guy with 2 master's degrees whose daddy was a doctor, and he was so dumb and just idiotic. They also threw money at all the problems, including CPS, and the mansion was covered in trash, but they didn't want anyone going through their things. Story 79. Ultimately, they will use their money to put you down. They want you to act like you are grateful for everything they do. They think they own you. Story 80. I'm not exactly very poor, but I do have a lot of financial struggles. Just to clarify, I'm a F-15 dating an M-17, and also we're Brazilian, for about 20 days now. Since I was a small child, I always liked games and computers. It's my absolute passion, however. It's hard for me to work on this passion because those things get expensive as hell, especially here in Brazil. My boyfriend isn't exactly rich, but he's got some money all right. He's got a gaming setup worth around R$15,000 in Brazilian currency, while I never spent more than a 500 on a console because I can't afford it. He also has a lot of academic opportunities since he can afford to go to a private university, stuff like that. While my parents struggle to afford a nice dinner every once in a while, if paying rent and bills go smoothly, I always try my best with him. Handmade gifts, letters, with the few things I have, and so does he. But it always sort of annoys me how he has everything I've ever wanted to have, but he doesn't really make much use of them. At all. While I struggle to study in my Shoot 2014 laptop, he's got a full gaming setup he plays 4 hours a week. I don't have many clothes, only a single pair of nice shoes, but he's got 4 pairs of shoes, a ton of beautiful, high-quality clothes, and more. I love him a lot, and he loves me back a lot too, but I'm scared to let him know of my financial struggles. I think that's the thing that messes with me the most. I'm scared that he may be somewhat disgusted of the fact that I'm poor and can't provide much to him, as much as he can to me. Answer: as a guy on the rich side who was raised in a way that looked roughly like you describe your BF, and knowing some guys with similar status, I can tell you one thing. He probably doesn't care about your status belongings. If anything, if he realizes the struggles, he might want to fix it somehow, which again might make you uncomfortable as you won't have the means to give it back to him. Perspective of men while dating is different. We look for love, compassion, support, safe haven to come back to after work, school, whatever. With money, it's not about how much you have, but how you handle it for us. If you throw money around, spend way more than you have getting into loans. That's when we will be disgusted. In fact, I married a girl similar to how you describe yourself. She impressed me with how much she cared about others, not herself. Story 81. Her parents made her dump me because I wasn't on their level. Funny part is, her father's business, which he inherited from daddy, went under. I make more money now than him, his wife, and the girl that dumped me combined. Story 82. It's exactly like 50 Shades of Grey. They all have dungeons, whips, and shoot. So get your butt ready because all sorts of stuff is going to be shoved up there. Why do you think hospitals are loaded with people who have things stuck up their butts? Also, they're very cheap too. They'll haggle with a street vendor for 5 minutes over the price of an apple. Story 83. You never even had a chance to marry them. You're just a random fling. They would never marry down. Also, they never use the word rich. It's wealthy. Story 84. Wahanan. They will Venmo request you for small expenses and never offer to pay you back when you've covered something. They assume that you should love them for their money and will not put effort in other ways. They think they are the catch no matter what and are blown away at your willingness to leave. You peasant. If you're a woman, they do not care about your career. They don't want to hear about it because it's not your job to have a career, and in their mind, it will never compare to theirs. On that note, they don't entertain any passion that you have unless it's something that they think will make you physically hotter, i.e. Pilates. These are just a few off the top of my head. Story 85. Well, his balcony door was stuck when I tried to open it. I wiggled it open and he's like, "You're the first one of my friends that could figure out how to open that door." I'm like, is that because they all have door greeters on their balcony or? Story 86. They are just as delusional as I always thought, and the ones who say they are down to earth are even more two-faced than the ones who accept their status. Story 87. I learned that people with millionaire money can get away with a lot of things, and that unfortunately bribery is everywhere. And be it law enforcement or judges, they all come with a price tag. Story 88. The rich people country club buffets are off the chain. Upper middle class country club buffets, not so much. Story 89. Haven't dated but have friends. One who's sure to a giant name brand food company. His parents didn't even raise him. He considered his nanny his parent. Anyway, listening to him complain about every minor inconvenience, never having worked a day in his life. Story 90. Sometimes money can buy you a level of happiness. Sometimes the unhappiness is still going to come. I've known utterly wretched wealthy people living in misery. Yeah, the bills were paid and they had a nice home, car, entertainment system, but they suffered within themselves, completely alone. Story 91. My MIL dated a guy worth hundreds of millions once. He invited me and my girlfriend, later wife, to one of his parties. So there we are, 2 broke college kids hobnobbing with this guy and his billionaire friends. One asked if I'd be upset if my parents didn't leave me all their money, and instead donated most of it. It really didn't compute for this guy that I wasn't expecting any inheritance and that, no, I wouldn't be upset to only receive 100 million or so. He didn't laugh when I mentioned him up for adoption. Story 92. I learned that he had a difficult time dealing with any lasting problems, since he was not used to having problems that do not easily just get solved. Story 93. There's a whole different code for behavior and interactions that are invisible if you haven't grown up around it or been coached in the ins and outs. Story 94. That I could not be with someone who had a fundamentally different childhood, life experiences, and perspectives. Story 95. I dated a few women in college who wanted for nothing. Their fathers were in the finance world, and one was on CNBC regularly. Fortunately, the one that was the richest was a great guy. I think he respected my work ethic and would have liked me to marry his daughter. Later in life, I dated another girl who had a very rich father who would take us to fully comped weekends in Atlantic City and ask me to play 5-10K a hand blackjack while he went to the toilet not caring what the stack looked like when he came back. He was also a gentleman, but his daughter was crazy. The lesson I learned was that while they had nice things, neither man showed even a fraction of what their wealth really was. The homes were not modest, but they could have afforded a lot more. Same with the cars and toys. Story 96. My mother married into money, then divorced. They were exceedingly kind, and I talked to the family occasionally. However, they didn't understand the concept of having no money. Are you going to the $300 a person opera? No, we are food bill for the week. Story 97. That dreams only become reality when you have the right person by your side. Money really doesn't buy happiness. Something was missing the whole time. Story 98. The wastefulness. Maybe this was just a then thing, but like throwing away food or half-finished household things, toilet paper, paper towels, etc. Like they would always just toss the leftovers from whatever we made. I could never do that and would always step in like, no. It's such a waste of hard-earned money to me, and there's nothing wrong with it. Story 99. The things they judge are very weird, things I never would have even thought of. Most rich people are very judgmental and superficial. I dated a rich guy who was very embarrassed about being rich, wanted to cosplay as poor, while mommy and daddy funded his whole life and gave him a 5K monthly allowance, LMAO. Very weird stuff. Story 100. Met my rich girlfriend's family once. Her dad asked if I majored in cleaning beakers. Her brother pitched a startup mid-dinner. Quit gray matter the next day. Ended up marrying a waitress. Working as high school chemistry teacher now. Turning 50 tomorrow. Time flies. Story 101. It was used against me. He would beg to spend money on me. I wasn't comfortable with it and liked to pay my own way. He insisted on buying me a few things and paying for a vacation over the period of 1 year. I accepted BC. He was so genuine and told me this was all a gift, and he expected nothing in return. Unfortunately, the man was extremely emotionally and verbally abusive, and it started unveiling slowly and in ways I didn't know about. It was my first real relationship. A lot of coercion started. If I didn't want to sleep with him, the guilt would begin mentioning the vacation, groceries we both ate, and the gifts. I did a lot for this man. Even though it wasn't monetary, I would say it was equal. He wouldn't have graduated college without me, for example. When I tried to leave him, he threw insults at me that I was a gold digger, used him for his money, etc. I was so young and it was so hurtful, and my first lesson in PPLW money, if they are abusive, will use it as a tool to hurt and control you. Story 102. Money can really break up families. I dated a girl and found out her family life is pretty screwed. Siblings don't like each other. Mother's pretty neglectful, and father is the only person who cares about her, but is the company owner. Eventually dad died and all hell broke loose with everyone wanting a share of his fortune. We separated a little after, and I wished I knew how the drama ended, but I also had pity for her. I have a great relationship with my family. Father wasn't the best, but he tried, and we always have each other back. I'm sure not all rich or poor families are like these examples, but it makes me appreciate what I have. Story 103. When I was a poor Russian student living on $200 a month at the time, I had an acquaintance from Moscow whom I met online. She suggested we take trips to Europe together, for example, to Paris. She was very surprised that I couldn't go. She was the, what are some things that ultra-rich people do, which the average person doesn't even consider? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience. Story 1. Years ago, I read an article about someone whose business was keeping ultra-rich people's cars ready to go. As in, if you have a Ferrari in multiple cities, they keep it fueled up. oil changed, etc., and drive it around the block once a week or so, and have it waiting at the airport when the owner flies into town. Answer: interesting, I am not wealthy, but I do keep my reasonably priced classic car in a classic car storage facility that houses mind-blowing exotics. My car is orders of magnitude less valuable than most anything there. I was out of town and got a message from the garage stating that they noticed my car's inspection was coming due soon, and if they can run it to one of their shops for a quick pass as a courtesy. I was floored and felt so strange taking them up on the offer. No taking a day off work, calling places to schedule. It was just done. It was so nice to have that taken care of, but it blew me away since that is the life of the ultra-wealthy, nearly every day with everything. Story 2. There are several single-family-owned Montessori schools, like a family office put together an entire mini-school just for their kids and their friends' kids. It became a thing to do when the pandemic hit. Some of them are 100 mobile too, like teaching on the jet all over the world. Answer: my family is in education and has known a couple people who've ended up in the orbit of the super rich. My sister graduated with her master's at a time when our state had a hiring freeze. My sister was one of few people hired right before it went into effect. She had a friend that ended up being a nanny in LA. One couple she worked for had like 4 nannies, 3 for the days for each kid, 1 for the nights. That couple had huge issues with paparazzi, so the nannies had to usually take the kids shopping for school unless the parents were able to sneak around. My sister's friend ended up moving on to even richer people whose lives were quieter because they didn't have media attention, paid more, and the people could live more like people. Also knew someone who took a year off from his normal teaching gig because some ultra-wealthy guy wanted to yacht around the world with his kids, so he wanted private tutors. The guy brought his kids along and basically had a 1-room schoolroom on a super yacht. Story 3. I live near Scottsdale with a lot of wealthy people. They constantly remodel their vacation homes, so there's always great stuff. I bought a brand new Viking refrigerator from Craigslist, still wrapped. It's 8 feet tall, 36. The homeowners decided they wanted a double refrigerator instead. They've owned the home 2 years, still haven't stayed a night there. The refrigerator retails for $18K. I got it for $1,500. Story 4. My mom's boss buys a brand new top-of-the-range car almost every year and gives the year-old one to one of his kids or family members. I jokingly asked for one. Truth is, I doubt I could even afford the insurance, let alone maintenance and fuel. Story 5. I have several rich friends who are my age, 50s, and don't work. Their biggest perk is attending every concert and show and buying front row. Not just our area, but if their favorite band is playing across the country, they fly with their kids there and spend the weekend. Answer: I was amazed to discover that some well-off people buy season tickets for theaters. So they have the same seat for every show, usually the best seats in the house. Edited to add, I discovered this by talking to people I was sitting next to when I went to shows in a few different venues. In those venues, season tickets were $1,500 a year minimum, as we discovered when my DH explored buying me one for my birthday. Sadly, that was well out of our budget. Plus, they would usually buy a pair of tickets. Story 6. I dated a girl from a super rich family for a couple years, and every spring her entire family would go through their closets and donate 90 of their wardrobe, and then go out and drop $20K on entirely new clothes for the year, because they had to have the new season of everything. As someone who grew up wearing clothes till they fell apart and patching them if they still fit, this blew my mind. Getting rid of perfectly good clothes because they were last season is just insane to me. Story 7. Paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for golf course memberships. I photograph luxury homes in the most exclusive golf